My brother demanded $25,000 for his wedding, so I kicked him out of my apartment instead. I let him live rent-free for years, helped him every time he needed money, and then he tried to guilt me into handing over more. When I said no, he and his fiancée called me selfish, insulted me, and thought I'd cave. So I changed the locks, posted the receipts online, and now they're broke, homeless, and burned every bridge they had. I never expected my own brother to turn against me over money, but I guess people will surprise you when given the chance. For most of my life, I thought we had a solid relationship. He was my only sibling, and I always tried to look out for him. But looking back, maybe I was just blind to the warning signs. My name is Olivia, and I'm 34 years old. I run a successful jewelry business, something I built from the ground up over the past decade. It wasn't easy. I spent years working insane hours, reinvesting every dollar I made, and putting my personal life on the back burner. But now, I'm in a place where I make good money, enough that I can afford a nice house, travel whenever I want, and live comfortably. I don't have kids, I don't have a husband, and frankly, I like my life that way. Then there's my younger brother, Jake. He's 27 and has always been the kind of guy who looks for the easiest route in life. Don't get me wrong, he's not a bad person, or at least he didn't used to be. But he's always had this expectation that things should just work out for him, even if he doesn't put in the effort. He works in sales, making decent but not great money, and his fiancée, Emily, 25, is a data analyst at the same company. Between the two of them, they make a livable income, but they're nowhere near where they want to be financially. For the past few years, I've been helping Jake out whenever he needed it. When he and Emily started getting serious, they wanted to move in together, but neither of them was in a great financial position. So I did something that I now regret. I let them move into my old apartment, the first place I ever lived on my own, rent-free. I figured it was a temporary arrangement, maybe a few months until they found a place of their own. But months turned into years, and they never even offered to start paying rent. And like an idiot, I never asked. I didn't need the money, and Jake was my brother, so I let it slide. I should have known that generosity was a one-way street with them. A couple of weeks ago, Jake and Emily got engaged, and I was honestly happy for them. They decided to have a small, intimate wedding, just family and a few close friends. The engagement party was simple but nice, until Emily pulled me aside for a private conversation. That's when she hit me with her ridiculous request. We've been thinking about wedding gifts, she started, giving me a big, fake smile. Since we're having a small wedding, we want something practical instead of traditional gifts. So we're just asking for money. That wasn't shocking. A lot of people prefer cash gifts these days. But then she dropped the bomb. For you specifically, we have a special request, she said, still smiling. We'd like you to give us $25,000. I actually laughed because there was no way she was serious. But she didn't laugh with me. She just looked at me expectantly, like I was supposed to nod and start writing a check. I shook my head. Yeah, that's not happening. Emily frowned like she couldn't believe I would dare to say no. Jake and I talked about it, she said, as if that made it more reasonable. You're the most successful person we know, and since you don't have a husband or kids, it's not like you need the money all for yourself. We thought it made perfect sense for you to help us start our life together. I was stunned. You thought it made sense to demand 25 grand from me? It's not a demand, she said sweetly, as if that made it better. It's just what we feel is fair. I wanted to walk away right then, but I was too shocked to move. I couldn't believe the entitlement I was hearing. It wasn't enough that I'd already let them live in my apartment for free for years, now they expected me to fund their future too? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Emily, I'll give you a reasonable wedding gift, but $25,000 is out of the question. Her expression soured immediately. Wow. I didn't realize you were so stingy. I could feel my temper rising. Stingy? I repeated. Are you serious? She crossed her arms. It's not like you can't afford it. You make more money than you need and your family. It's the least you could do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emily, I don't owe you anything. Her eyes narrowed. If you're not willing to support your own brother, then maybe you shouldn't even come to the wedding. That was the moment I snapped. I didn't yell or make a scene. I just looked her dead in the eye and said, fine. Then I turned around and walked right out of the party. I didn't bother explaining myself to anyone. I just told a few people I had a headache, got in my car, and drove home. That night I called Jake, still hoping that maybe he wasn't in on this. That maybe Emily had come up with this ridiculous idea on her own. I was wrong. Jake sighed when I brought it up, like I was the one being difficult. Liv, I'm your only brother, he said, like that somehow justified it. I just thought, given how well you're doing, this would be something nice you could do for me. I felt physically sick. You thought I'd just hand over $25,000 because I have more money than you? Well, yeah, he admitted. We're planning to start a business and we need seed money. It's not like we're wasting it. Oh, so now I'm supposed to be your investor? I snapped. He groaned. It's not like that. I didn't let him finish. You know what? I'm done talking about this. If you and Emily really think this is appropriate, then I don't want anything to do with your wedding. And with that I hung up. I wish that had been the end of it. But it was only the beginning. After I hung up on Jake that night, I figured he'd call me back. Maybe to apologize, maybe to at least try and smooth things over. But the next day, radio silence. I didn't reach out either. I was still too angry to even think about dealing with him or Emily. I'd spent years helping him financially, covering for him, letting him live in my apartment rent-free. And now, instead of being grateful, he was demanding even more from me, like I was his personal ATM. But of course, the silence didn't last long. 2 days later, I got a text from Emily. Hey, Olivia. I just wanted to check in. I feel like things got a little tense the other night, and I want to clear the air. Maybe we can talk. I rolled my eyes. Oh, she wanted to clear the air now? After basically telling me I wasn't welcome at the wedding unless I handed over a small fortune? But fine, I wasn't about to play games. I texted back. There's nothing to clear up. You asked me for $25,000. I said no. I don't owe you an explanation. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Jake. I hesitated before answering, but I figured I might as well deal with it head-on. Liv, he started, his voice already annoyed. Can you just listen for a second? Oh, I've been listening, I shot back. You and Emily made your expectations very clear. He let out a deep sigh, like I was the unreasonable one. Look, you know I wouldn't ask if I didn't really need it. I almost laughed. Jake, you don't need $25,000 for a wedding gift. You just want it. It's not about the wedding, he snapped. Emily and I are trying to start a business and this would be seed money. I blinked. Wait, so now it's not even a wedding gift? You want me to invest in you? Liv, No, seriously, I cut him off. You expect me to just hand over 25 grand so you two can quit your jobs and do what exactly? He hesitated. We have a few ideas we're working on. Oh, so not even a real business plan, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You just figured you'd use me as your investor while you figure it out? Jake groaned. You make more than enough money, Liv. It's not like you're struggling. You don't even have a family to support. And there it was. The thing that had been bubbling beneath the surface. The real reason they thought I should just give them what they wanted. I gritted my teeth. So because I don't have a husband and kids, my money is just up for grabs? That's not what I meant, he backpedaled. Look, I'm your only sibling. This is the one thing I've ever asked you for. That's complete bullshit, I said bluntly. I've helped you countless times. Who do you think covered your bills when your job cut your hours? Who let you and Emily live in my apartment for free? Or did you conveniently forget about all of that? That was different, he mumbled. No, it wasn't, I snapped. You've been taking from me for years, and now the one time I set a boundary, you and Emily act like I'm selfish? She just feels like you're being cold about this, he muttered. Cold? I laughed bitterly. Jake, I owe you nothing. And if you and Emily can't accept that, then I don't see any reason to keep talking. And with that, I hung up again. At first, I thought that was the end of it. But no, if anything, they doubled down. Over the next few days, the texts and calls started piling up. Emily sent me long, whiny messages about how she and Jake were just trying to secure their future and how families should support each other. Jake followed up with guilt-trippy passive-aggressive texts like, I guess I just expected more from you. It's sad that money means more to you than family. We were counting on you, Liv. It was endless. Every time I ignored them, they'd find new ways to poke at me. They even tried looping in my parents, but at that point, my parents were staying out of it. That is, until Emily sent the nastiest message yet. The breaking point. It was a long text, but one part stood out the most. You're being incredibly selfish. You don't have kids, you don't have a husband, and frankly, at this point, it's clear you never will. You have more money than you'll ever need, and yet you still refuse to help your own brother. Maybe if you weren't so self-absorbed, you wouldn't be so alone. I stared at my phone, shaking with rage. That was it. That was the moment I officially snapped. Because they hadn't just come after my money. They'd made it personal. They thought they could just insult me into giving them what they wanted. That they could take everything I've built, everything I've earned, and act like I was just some cold-hearted, selfish bitch for not handing it over. Well, guess what? If they wanted to play dirty, I could play even dirtier. I took a deep breath, calmed my racing thoughts, and made a decision. They wanted money? They wanted help? They wanted to guilt-trip me? Fine. But they were about to lose the biggest free ride they'd ever had. Because the days of me being the generous big sister were officially over. And the first thing I was about to do? Kick their entitled asses out of my apartment. I sat on my couch that night, staring at my phone, thinking about everything I had done for Jake over the years. I never kept score, but now that he and Emily were treating me like some greedy villain, I started running through it all in my head. Jake had never been great with money. He bounced between jobs, always looking for something easier, something that didn't require too much effort. Every time he hit a rough patch, I helped him out. No hesitation. Paid off his credit card when he was drowning in debt, covered his rent when he was between jobs, even gave him extra when he wanted to take Emily on a vacation he couldn't afford. I never asked for anything back. And then there was the apartment. The one I bought because it meant something to me. The first place I ever lived on my own, the place that represented all the years I'd worked to be independent. When Jake and Emily needed a place, I let them move in. No rent, no conditions. They treated it like it was theirs, never once offering to contribute. And now, after everything, they had the audacity to act like I was selfish. The messages didn't stop. Every time I ignored them, another one would come through. Emily was relentless, switching between guilt-tripping and outright insults. One moment it was, "I just don't understand why you're doing this to us." The next, "You must be so bitter and miserable to act this way." Jake, meanwhile, played the victim. "I thought we were closer than this, Liv. I thought family mattered." They weren't asking anymore. They were demanding, like I owed them. I let them live in my apartment for years, and somehow in their minds, that wasn't enough. I gave them one last chance. I called Jake, hoping maybe he'd finally see reason, maybe he'd understand just how far over the line they had stepped. The moment he answered, I knew it was pointless. His tone was irritated, like I was the one being difficult. Before I could say anything, he sighed, "Liv, can we just move past this? You've made your point. Now can you just do this one thing for us?" I clenched my jaw. "You still think I owe you money?" "It's not about owing," he argued. "It's about doing something for your family. I let you live in my apartment rent-free for years," I snapped. "How much more do you expect me to give you?" "That's different," he said, just like before. "No, Jake. It's not. I have done nothing but help you. And the first time I say no, you turn on me. You let Emily talk to me like I'm some awful person just because I won't give you what you want. You both act like I'm hoarding money for fun, like I didn't work my ass off to get where I am." He was silent for a moment, then let out another sigh. "Liv, you make so much more than us. It's not like this would even affect you." I almost laughed at how ridiculous he sounded. "You think that makes it okay? That just because I have money you're entitled to it?" "It's not about entitlement," he started, but I cut him off. "Yes, it is. And I'm done." He scoffed. "Done with what?" "Done with this conversation. Done with you two treating me like a bank account. Done with letting you live in my apartment like it's yours." That got his attention. "Wait. What?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You heard me. You and Emily need to find a new place. You're moving out." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then he finally spoke, voice rising. "Are you serious? You're kicking me out over this?" "I should have done it a long time ago." "Liv, you can't be serious," he said again, his voice almost frantic now. "Where are we supposed to go?" "Not my problem," I said, my tone cold now. "Figure it out." Emily must have been listening because I suddenly heard her in the background. "Oh my God, is she actually doing this?" she snapped. Then she grabbed the phone. "Wow, Olivia. You're just proving exactly what we said. You only care about yourself." "No, Emily," I said, my voice calm. "I care about myself enough to stop being used." She huffed. "You're gonna regret this." I laughed. "Doubt it." And with that I hung up. The night before the wedding, I got an email from Jake and Emily. I had blocked them everywhere, so this was their last resort. The email was long, nasty, and full of insults. They called me selfish, bitter, and accused me of caring more about money than family. Emily made sure to throw in another jab about how I was alone, saying I'd probably die that way if I didn't change my attitude. I read it twice, felt my blood boil, then made a decision. The next morning, while they were busy getting married, I drove to my apartment and had the locks changed. Legally, I knew this was a gray area, but I also knew they weren't in a position to fight me on it. They had been living there rent-free, without a lease, for years. I didn't owe them anything. By the time the locksmith was done, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. I had let them take advantage of me for too long, and this was my way of finally putting an end to it. They spent their wedding night at a fancy hotel celebrating. I knew because I had been invited to that dinner, before I was exiled from the family for not handing over $25,000. I didn't feel bad about missing it. The next afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then another, then another. By the fifth call, I knew exactly what was happening. They had gone home, and they couldn't get in. An hour later, I heard banging on my front door. I didn't even have to check who it was. I let them knock for a while before finally opening it. Jake's face was red with anger, his jaw clenched. Emily stood beside him, arms crossed, shaking with rage. "You changed the locks?" Jake barked. "Yup," I said, crossing my arms. "You had no right," Emily spat. "I had every right," I shot back. "It's my apartment, not yours." Jake's hands balled into fists. "Liv, this is ridiculous. You locked us out the day after our wedding? What is wrong with you?" I raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong with me? You mean besides the fact that you both spent weeks harassing me for money, insulted me when I refused, and sent a disgusting email right before your big day?" Jake threw his hands up. "That email wasn't even that bad. You're overreacting." Emily scoffed. "You're punishing us over a gift? Wow, Liv, you really are pathetic." I let out a slow, sarcastic laugh. "Yeah, Emily, I'm the pathetic one, not the two grown adults who relied on me for free housing, and then turned on me the second I stopped funding their lives." Jake's expression faltered. "We weren't." "Save it," I interrupted. "You were using me, and I finally realized it. So now you get to figure things out on your own." He exhaled sharply, then dropped his voice. "Where are we supposed to go?" I shrugged. "Not my problem." Emily's face twisted with fury. "You know what? You'll regret this. You've lost your family over money. Enjoy being alone." I smiled. "Enjoy finding a new place to live." She let out a frustrated scream, spun on her heel, and stormed off. Jake stood there a moment longer, staring at me like he wanted to say something, then shook his head and followed her. I didn't feel bad. Not one bit. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew I had done the right thing. The day after I kicked them out, I woke up to another email. It was even nastier than the first. Jake and Emily had apparently spent the night fuming because they had nothing better to do, and now they were doubling down. They didn't just call me selfish this time. They went for everything they could. According to them, I was a bitter, lonely woman who didn't know how to be part of a family. I was going to grow old and die alone, clutching my money like some kind of miserable witch. They said I had always been jealous of Jake, that deep down I hated seeing him happy, and that's why I had done this, to ruin his marriage before it even started. And the best part? They actually had the nerve to say that they forgave me, that they would be willing to move on if I apologized and made things right, which of course meant giving them money. I read the email 3 times, getting angrier with each sentence. These two had leeched off me for years, treated me like their personal ATM, insulted me when I finally said no, and now they thought they could shame me into changing my mind? I wasn't just mad, I was done. So I did the one thing I knew would hit them the hardest. I posted everything online. I took screenshots of the email and uploaded it to Facebook with a long post explaining everything, how I had let them live rent-free, how they demanded money, how they turned on me when I refused, and how they were now sending me vile messages because I dared to have boundaries. I laid it all out, word for word, and then hit post. It didn't take long for people to notice. Within an hour, my notifications were blowing up. Friends, extended family, people I hadn't talked to in years were shocked. The comments were brutal. Most people were on my side, calling Jake and Emily entitled, saying I did the right thing. A few even said they had suspicions about them before but never realized how bad it was. Some of Jake's old friends messaged me privately, telling me they weren't surprised he had been acting this way for a while, ever since getting with Emily. Apparently, they had lost a lot of friends because of how demanding and entitled they had become. Of course, Jake and Emily saw the post, and they lost their minds. Within hours, they were calling and texting, begging me to take it down. First, they tried to act like they were hurt. How could you betray family like this? When that didn't work, they got angry. You're ruining our reputation. You're making us look bad. As if they hadn't done that to themselves. Emily even tried playing the victim, claiming I was harassing them by making this public. I ignored them. I wasn't going to delete a single word. They had no problem dragging me when they thought they had the upper hand. Well, now the truth was out, and they could deal with the consequences. My parents were the last to call. At first, they were furious that I had put everything out there for the world to see, but when I told them to go read the emails for themselves, they went quiet. For the first time, they couldn't defend Jake. They finally saw what I had been dealing with. And after that, they stopped calling me to guilt trip me. I guess even they couldn't pretend Jake and Emily were the victims anymore. Jake and Emily went into damage control mode, trying to convince people that I had twisted the story. But nobody believed them. I had receipts. And just like that, their little world started falling apart. After my post went viral among family and friends, the fallout was immediate. Jake and Emily were getting shut out left and right. Friends who used to tolerate them started cutting ties. Distant relatives who barely knew me suddenly had strong opinions about their entitlement. And even some of Emily's own family started questioning what kind of people they had really become. But while the internet had my back, my parents weren't as supportive. They called me a few days later angry. "This wasn't necessary, Olivia," my mom said. "You could have handled this privately." I shot back. "I tried to keep this between us. You knew what they were doing and you did nothing. Now that people see the truth, suddenly it's a problem." My dad sighed heavily. "We're not saying they were right, but did you really have to humiliate them?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean like how they insulted me? How they called me selfish, pathetic, and said I'd die alone? I guess that wasn't humiliating." "Olivia," my mom snapped, her voice tired. "They were just upset. They acted out." I shook my head. "No. They got caught. That's the only reason anyone cares now." My dad tried to play peacekeeper. "Look, they're struggling. They made mistakes, but maybe you should have handled this differently." I clenched my jaw. Handled it how? By giving them the money so they wouldn't throw a tantrum? By letting them keep living in my apartment for free? What exactly was I supposed to do? There was silence on the line. My parents didn't have an answer because they knew I was right. "Jake is upset, Liv," my mom finally said. They had nowhere to go after the wedding. They showed up at our house with all their stuff, crying. "Good," I said flatly. "Maybe now they'll learn that actions have consequences." Mom gasped. "How can you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" I repeated. "Cruel is what they did to me. Cruel is taking from someone for years, then turning on them the second they say no. I'm not playing this game anymore. They can figure out their own lives. I'm done." Mom started to argue, but I ended the call. I wasn't interested in justifying myself anymore. A few days passed and I heard through mutual friends that Jake and Emily were spiraling. They were staying with Emily's parents, who weren't thrilled about it. They had started calling around, trying to find people to take their side, but nobody wanted to deal with them. Their old friends were distancing themselves, and their new life as a married couple wasn't looking so glamorous anymore. I won't lie, it felt good knowing they were finally facing reality. They had spent years living on my generosity, assuming I'd always be there to bail them out. Now they were on their own. And I wasn't going to feel bad about that. It took a while, but my parents finally saw the truth. After my last conversation with them, I refused to engage any further. I didn't pick up their calls, didn't respond to their messages, and for the first time in my life, I let them sit with the consequences of their own inaction. Then, a few days later, I got a short message from my mom. "We saw the emails. We were wrong." That was it. No long speech, no attempt to justify Jake and Emily's behavior. Just an admission that they had finally read for themselves how disgusting and entitled their golden son had been. A part of me wanted to throw it back in their faces, tell them how ridiculous it was that it took this long for them to believe me, but I didn't even care anymore. I had moved on. Meanwhile, Jake and Emily were burning bridges left and right. After my post, the fallout had spread beyond family. Their mutual friends, many of whom had already distanced themselves, cut ties completely. People didn't want to associate with two entitled adults who thought extorting family was acceptable. Some of Emily's own relatives, the ones she had assumed would side with her, refused to even speak to her. Word had gotten around fast, and no amount of damage control was going to fix their reputation now. They had embarrassed themselves far beyond what they ever expected. I heard through a mutual friend that Jake was furious, convinced that I had somehow ruined his life by refusing to just give him what he wanted. He and Emily had even blocked me on everything, which I found hilarious because, honestly, what more did they think they could take from me? I had already cut them off myself. As for me, I thrived. I put my apartment up for rent, and within a week, I had a new tenant. Someone who actually paid rent. No more freeloading, no more entitlement, no more family guilt-tripping me for being successful. For the first time in years, I felt free. I wasn't wasting money supporting someone who didn't appreciate it, wasn't constantly being drained by Jake's excuses, wasn't dealing with Emily's manipulative nonsense. I had cut them out completely, and my life was better for it. I still don't know if my parents will ever fully make things right. They chose Jake's side for too long, and while I know they're ashamed now, I don't feel the need to rush back into family gatherings anytime soon. Maybe one day, I'll let them back in, but only if they truly understand that I'm done being the family safety net. If they don't, then I'm perfectly fine keeping my distance. Jake and Emily can figure out their own lives now. They wanted independence, they wanted to make their own way, and now they get to. Without me. Looking back, I can't believe it took me this long to see what was right in front of me. For years, I let myself believe that helping Jake was just what family did. That it wasn't a big deal to cover for him, to let him live in my apartment rent-free, to hand him money whenever he needed it. I never saw it as enabling him, but that's exactly what it was. I taught him that he could take from me without consequence, and when I finally said no, he reacted like a spoiled child. That's on me. But it's also on him. I've learned that family entitlement is a bottomless pit. The more you give, the more they take. And when you finally set a boundary, they act like you're the villain. But I'm done being the person who bends over backward just because we share DNA. Being family doesn't entitle someone to my money, my time, or my energy. Respect is a two-way street, and Jake and Emily showed me that they never had any for me. So why should I feel bad for cutting them off? At first, I wondered if I would regret it. If one day, I'd look back and feel guilty. But instead, I feel lighter. I don't miss the stress of constantly being their financial cushion. I don't miss the guilt-tripping, the manipulation, the expectation that I'd always put them before myself. And most importantly, I don't need my family's validation anymore. For a long time, I thought that being the good sister meant doing whatever was needed to keep the peace, even if it hurt me. Now I know that setting boundaries doesn't make me cruel. It makes me free. Jake and Emily are still struggling. Last I heard, they're bouncing between temporary places, unable to find something stable because, shocker, starting a business requires more than just demanding money from relatives. They burned so many bridges that they don't have much of a support system left, and honestly, that's not my problem. They made their bed. Now they get to lie in it. As for me, I'm doing better than ever. The apartment is rented out, bringing an extra income. My business is thriving, and I'm finally focusing on myself without the weight of other people's expectations dragging me down. And the best part? I don't owe anyone an explanation for it. I don't know if Jake will ever change. I don't know if my parents will ever fully understand why I had to do what I did. And that's okay. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm living my life on my terms.